Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you're here with us today because I have to admit, looking at the news this week has been a completely disorienting experience.
Oh, it really has been.
Right. I mean, you're scrolling through your feed, and on one hand, you see these massive headlines screaming about trade wars and the end of globalization.
Yes.
And then literally the next link you click is this massive celebration about the Supreme Court saving the economy. And then you check the markets, and they are just doing their own thing entirely. It honestly feels like we're being gaslit by the 24-hour news cycle.
That is a very rational reaction to a completely irrational information environment. What you are seeing there is just the surface turbulence, the white caps on the waves.
Mm-hmm.
But you aren't seeing the tectonic plates moving underneath the global economy.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are stripping away all that noise. I want to help you understand what is actually moving the ground beneath our feet. And to do that, we are looking at a really dense, really fascinating discussion between two heavyweights of economic thought who, frankly, shouldn't agree on anything.
No, they really shouldn't. It is a rare and, honestly, somewhat terrifying alignment. We are analyzing a conversation between Yanis Varoufakis and Wolfgang Munchau from their show called The Iconoclasts.
Yeah, and just to give you some context on these sources, Varoufakis is the former Greek finance minister. He is a self-described Marxist, very much a heterodox thinker on the left.
Yep.
And then you have Munchau, who is this veteran economic journalist, a deep insider in Euro intelligence, and generally a much more liberal, free market guy. I mean, if these two walked into a room together, you would expect a fist fight over tax policy.
Exactly. But instead, what we find in their discussion is this terrified consensus. I mean, my role here is to stay calm and analytical and focus on the why, but looking at their source material, they're looking at the exact same data points.
The U.S. trade war.
The weaponization of the dollar, the rise of AI. And they're coming to the exact same conclusion. The world isn't just changing. The old world is dead.
They actually call it a new world disorder, which is just a chilling phrase.
Is. And the alarming part isn't that they disagree on how to fix it. It's that they agree entirely on the diagnosis. They argue that while the whole world is distracted looking at taxes on steel or electric cars, the real shift, the big picture, is happening in what Varoufakis calls cloud capital.
Cloud capital, okay.
Yes, this fusion of big tech and U.S. hegemony.
Yeah.
It's not just about economics anymore. It is about the future of human agency itself.
Okay, that is a massive claim. The idea that AI might actually be killing the free market entirely, we are definitely going to get there. But I think we have to start with the thing that has everyone, probably you included, so confused right now. The tariffs.
Let's unpack it.
Because the headline everywhere this week was that the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs. The markets rallied, the politicians and commentators, all the usual Panthers cheered. People were treating it like this huge liberation day.
It certainly felt that way if you were reading the Financial Times or watching the mainstream broadcasts. But both Varoufakis and Munchau are telling us explicitly that this celebration is completely misplaced. The tariffs are a distraction. They are irrelevant.
Wait, how can they be irrelevant? The Supreme Court literally said no. I mean, isn't that the end of the story?
Not even close. You really have to look at the legal mechanics of the ruling, which Munchau breaks down beautifully. The Supreme Court did not say you cannot have tariffs.
Okay.
They said you cannot impose these specific tariffs using this specific emergency power in this specific way.
So it's just a procedural objection.
It is a formatting error. It is essentially a judge telling the administration that they filled out the wrong paperwork and they just need to reintroduce the tariffs in a more bureaucratic way.
Wow. So it's a delay. It's not a defeat at all.
Exactly. Both of our sources agree this ruling is a non-event. Munchau calculates the actual real-world impact of this formatting shuffle. For China, the ruling might mean tariffs drop by a tiny marginal percentage for a little while. For the UK, they might actually go up slightly because of how the new bureaucratic classification works.
It is literally rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's a legalistic shuffle.
That is exactly what it is. And that is why Trump doesn't seem to care. He bought himself time. The plan, according to the sources, is that he will implement a 15% interim tariff, which he has the executive power to do, and then he will just reinstate the old structure under a new legal basis. It's completely irrelevant to the broader Trumpian project.
It's a shell game.
It is.
But here's what I don't get. Maybe you can help make sense of this for me. If this is so obvious, if it's just a paperwork delay, why is Europe reacting this way? You look at their Spiegel or Le Monde, and they are celebrating this court ruling as if they were just handed this huge new source of bargaining power.
Ah, yes. That is the most dangerous part of this entire delusion. Varoufakis points out the massive contrast between this public celebration and the private reality.
Yeah.
The EU thinks they have power, but they're terrified to actually use it.
Really? Because they're a massive economy.
They are, but look at the signals they are sending. Even as they cheer the ruling, they're sending all these back-channel messages to Washington saying things like, "We are not interfering, this is an internal U.S. matter. Please do not think we are challenging you, Donald."
That is incredibly submissive. Why are they so scared?
This is where Wolfgang Munchau makes a critical point. It is what we can call the security trap.
Yeah.
You cannot have a trade war against the country that you rely on for your physical security.
Oh, because they need the U.S. military umbrella.
Precisely. Europe has not pooled its defense resources. They do not have a unified army. They are currently preparing for a potential, very real conflict with Russia, and as a result, they are actually increasing their dependency on the U.S.
So the idea of the EU decoupling from the U.S. or fighting a real trade war is just delusional.
Completely delusional. You can't complain about the price of steel to the guy holding the only shield that protects you. Trump knows this. He knows he can squeeze them economically because they simply have nowhere else to go.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If tariffs are just a distraction, just a tool to squeeze dependence, what is the actual master plan? What is the real game here?
To understand the real game, we have to introduce a concept called exorbitant privilege.
Exorbitant privilege. I feel like I've heard that phrase tossed around, but it always sounds a bit abstract.
It was coined back in the 1960s by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the French finance minister at the time. To understand it, you have to completely invert how you think about debt.
Okay, because normally if I have too much debt, I go bankrupt. It's a weakness.
Exactly. For a normal person or a normal country, debt is a weakness. But the United States is the first power in human history to draw its strength from its weakness. It draws power from its debt.
How does that actually work?
Think of the U.S. economy as a giant vacuum cleaner. The more debt the U.S. has, meaning its massive trade and budget deficits, the more dollars it prints. It uses those newly printed IOUs to buy up the output of the rest of the world. German cars, Chinese electronics.
We get all the actual physical stuff?
Yes. And what does the rest of the world get? They get dollars. But they can't just spend billions of dollars in their own local economies without causing massive inflation. So what do? They have to absorb that American debt. They take those dollars and buy U.S. Treasury bonds. They lend the money right back to the United States.
So they are funding the very system that is dominating them.
Exactly. It is a peculiar failure. The U.S. goes deeper and deeper into the red, but by doing so, it expands its capacity to make the rest of the world work for its ruling class.
That is wild. And this connects back to history, doesn't it? Because we've seen this weaponization of the dollar before. I'm thinking of the Nixon shock.
Yes, 1971. That is the perfect historical parallel. Varoufakis argues that what Trump is doing now is exactly what Nixon did then. Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard specifically to weaponize it. He wanted to devalue the dollar.
Which seems counterintuitive. Why do you want your own money to be worth less?
Because a cheaper dollar makes your exports cheaper and foreign imports more expensive. Nixon wanted to push up global energy costs to intentionally hurt German and Japanese manufacturers more than American ones.
Wow, it was economic warfare.
Absolutely. There's a famous quote from Henry Kissinger from that era. When he was asked who caused the oil crisis and all that economic pain, he just flatly said, "We did."
We did. Not, oh, it was an accident.
No, it was a strategy. And Varoufakis synthesizes this by pointing out that Trump has run the exact same playbook. You have all these centrist economists complaining that the dollar is losing value or that the deficit is out of control.
But that's the point.
That is exactly the point. Trump wants to devalue it to gain an advantage. He wants to force manufacturing back to the U.S.
Okay, so if you are listening to this, you really need to pivot your thinking. It's not about oil and traditional manufacturing anymore, though. The twist today is much more modern.
Yes, we have to transition to the modern twist. And this brings us back to that term Varoufakis coined, cloud capital.
Right, and most people, when they hear that, they probably just think of big tech or AI or, where their photos are stored. But Varoufakis sees it as something much more insidious.
He sees it as a completely new form of capital that fundamentally reproduces U.S. hegemony. Cloud capital isn't just a service you use. It is the infrastructure you rely on to exist. And the Trump administration is using these tech lords to essentially hold the West to ransom.
Hold them to ransom how? Like, what does that actually look like on the ground?
Let's look at the specific examples Munchau and Varoufakis discuss. Take Palantir, AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, and Google. These companies are spreading their tentacles into critical national infrastructure all over the world. A prime example is the UK's National Health Service, the NHS.
Which is a massive, sacred institution over there.
And its data, its logistics, its very nervous system is increasingly reliant on American cloud capital. Or look at digital payments, stable coins, the Visa and MasterCard networks.
Oh, right. Because if you control the payment networks, you control the economy.
Exactly. They are explicit threats to weaponize those networks.
Right.
If a country doesn't fall in line, the U.S. doesn't need to send in the military. They just cut off your access to cloud capital. Your hospitals stop functioning. Your credit cards stop working.
It's an octopus. It's not just a trade deal about the price of cars. It is the actual wiring of the global system. Your health, your money, your data, all being owned by American cloud capital.
And that is exactly why Varoufakis says looking at tariffs is like looking at the topsoil. If you want to understand the future, you have to look at the techno-tectonic plates underneath.
Which means we need to talk about the engine powering those plates. Artificial intelligence.
We do.
Because there is so much noise about AI right now. Munchau actually mentioned a story about a German consultant he spoke to, right?
Yes, just 3 months ago, this consultant confidently told Wolfgang that AI was just a bubble that was about to burst.
On what planet do you live? Seriously, that is just absurd at this point.
It is absurd, but it reveals a deep misunderstanding of what AI actually is. Wolfgang, who has a lot of expertise in this area, provides a really accurate history to debunk this. People think AI just popped out of nowhere last year.
Right.
But phase 1, which was machine learning, things like random forests and support vector machines, that was 20 years ago. Then phase 2, the shift to neural networks and deep learning, scaling everything up, that started 8 or 9 years ago.
So the current state isn't some brand new, untested fad. It just finally has the massive amounts of data and compute power to show its full capabilities.
Exactly.
But you still hear this argument, and I hear it all the time from smart people, the stochastic parrot argument. This idea that AI is basically just a really fancy garbage collector. It sucks up all the information on the internet, jumbles it around, and just repeats patterns without actually understanding anything.
Wolfgang strongly refutes that. He completely shuts down the parrot theory. AI is no longer just doing pattern matching, it is doing actual reasoning. Verbal reasoning, logical reasoning.
How do we know that for sure? Like, what proves it isn't just copying and pasting from Wikipedia?
The prime example they discuss is the mathematician Terence Tao. He is using AI to prove theorems that have never been proved before.
Oh, wow.
Think about that. If the theorem has never been solved, the answer does not exist on the internet for the AI to copy.
Right.
It has to actually reason through the logic to find the solution. That destroys the garbage collector theory.
That is profound.
And it is not just an abstract math. Look at self-driving cars. They are not learning to drive by reading text on the internet. They are learning from real-life physics, spatial data, and real-time environments.
So why is Europe so blind to this? If the evidence is this clear, why are they calling it a bubble?
Munchau's critique is brutal here. Europe is in deep denial. They consistently underestimate everything. They underestimated Putin. They underestimated Trump. They underestimated China, crypto, and now they are underestimating AI.
Because they have no strategy.
None. And because they have no strategy, they will inevitably end up having to use proprietary U.S. models, which just reinforces their dependency on American cloud capital. They are locking themselves into the very trap Varoufakis is warning about.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is the part of the deep dive that I found genuinely mind-bending. I want you, the listener, to really brace yourself for this. We are pivoting to Yanis Varoufakis' most provocative theory. He says AI is actually killing the market.
Yes, the death of markets.
It's a huge claim. He is saying that both the free marketeers and the social democrats are completely obsolete now because the very foundation of their worldview, the market itself, is being replaced.
It is a radical shift. And to understand the mechanism, we have to look at the relationship we're building with what he calls the bot.
The bot.
Yes. Very soon, everyone will have a bot. An AI assistant that knows your entire history, it knows your secrets, your preferences, your wishes. It knows what you want to buy before you do.
And we become dependent on it.
You develop neurodependence. You form a literal relationship with this algorithm. And here's where the market dies. Imagine you have this bot. that perfectly curates your life. Suddenly, a competitor comes along and says, hey, my bot is $5 cheaper a month.
Do you switch?
Exactly. Do you switch? No. Because switching would mean losing all that context, all that history. Varoufakis uses a brilliant analogy. He says leaving your bot wouldn't be like changing supermarkets. It would be like going through a painful divorce.
Oh, man. So the whole market concept of shopping around looking for a better price, that just completely dies. You're locked in.
You are locked in. And that leads to a much darker economic reality. Varoufakis paints two potential futures, comparing them to Star Trek and The Matrix.
Let's start with Star Trek. I like Star Trek.
Well, the Star Trek scenario revolves around the replicator. We already have the beginnings of this. Look at the Apple factories in Austin, Texas. They are already largely automated.
Right. Machines making machines.
Now combine that automated production, the replicators, with immersive virtual environments, basically holodecks, generated by AI. The only question that matters is who owns the machine?
Right.
If the machinery belongs to humanity, to the commons, then you have Star Trek. You have a post-scarcity society where everyone benefits.
But if they don't?
If a tiny elite caste owns the machines that produce all our goods and all our digital dreams, that is not capitalism anymore. It is techno-feudalism.
Techno-feudalism. So we are the serfs, and the tech lords own the land, or the cloud, in this case.
Exactly. And the old rules of capitalism break down. Think about private property and copyright. Copyright makes absolutely no sense in a world where AI machines can just sweep up everything ever created by humans and instantly generate new, indistinguishable content. The concept of private ownership of ideas dissolves.
So we are really at this massive political fork in the road. It is a choice between humans controlling the machines, basically making the machines our slaves so we can live freely, or humans being embedded into machinery that we do not control.
The Matrix scenario.
Right. Which makes this a strictly political question, not just a technological one.
It is the defining political question of our time.
So, logically, my next question is, where are the referees? If this is such a massive threat to human agency, where are the regulators? Why isn't anyone stopping this?
Because the regulators are fighting the last war. They are completely outmatched.
What about competition policy? Antitrust laws?
Weakened systematically since the 1990s and 2000s. But more importantly, those laws were designed for cartels and monopolies in the physical world. They were designed to stop oil companies from price gouging. They have no framework for dealing with AI and cloud capital.
Okay, but what about Europe? They are supposed to be the kings of regulation. What about GDPR? Everyone talks about GDPR as this great privacy shield.
Munchau is very clear on this. GDPR is a joke in the face of AI. It was designed for a totally different era, for an era of data whizzing around. It was meant to stop companies from improperly sharing your email address.
But AI doesn't need to share your email address to control you.
Exactly. Even a perfectly GDPR-compliant bot operating entirely within the legal framework can intimately manipulate you. It can threaten democracy by shaping what you see and how you feel without ever technically violating your data privacy.
So the regulations are just entirely unsuitable. They completely failed to foresee the actual nature of the threat.
They did. We're trying to regulate a spaceship using maritime law from the 18th century. It just doesn't apply.
Wow, okay. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let me just quickly recap this journey we've been on for you. We started with what seems like boring bureaucratic tariffs. Then we uncovered the weaponized dollar and how the U.S. uses debt as power. From there, we scaled up to cloud capital, this octopus-controlling global infrastructure. And finally, we landed on the terrifying reality of AI causing the death of markets.
It is a stark progression.
It is. And the core lesson here, the thing you have to take away from these sources is do not get distracted by the topsoil. Do not get caught up in the tweets or the procedural court rulings. You have to watch the tectonic plates. Watch AI, watch the debt, watch the dependencies.
I couldn't agree more. If I can add a final word, it's simply to remind the listener that denial is the biggest risk we face right now. Underestimating the sheer speed of this change is dangerous. You need to constantly question the narrative. When people say jobs are disappearing, realize it is much deeper than that. When politicians say the market will fix it, realize that the market, as we know it, might not even exist anymore.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over today. Think about everything we discussed regarding the bot. If AI bots eventually know us better than we know ourselves, and we reach a point where we literally cannot break up with them without ruining our lives, are we actually the customers of the future economy? Or are we just the pets of the people who own the code?
That is a profoundly unsettling question.
Right. Keep looking beneath the surface, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye.